Everybody tells you you have to have someone read your book, someone to critique it, beta read it. But in the big picture, how do you even know you're putting that early work in front of the right people? Let's talk about that in this episode of Horrible Writing.
That will never work. You can't publish that. Seriously? Don't. Oh my God, that's other things you can do. That's bad. You probably should find other hobbies. You ever learn to stop? Be happy. Well, you don't bother me. I've seen better things. Do you really want to? And grow. Give it up.
Welcome to Horrible Writing, the rawest, most candid, in-your-face writing show on the interwebs because none of us have time to suck. Let's do this. Hey everybody, Paul Sading, host of Horrible Writing. Long time no see. Those of you who follow the show religiously, a lot of you over on the Horrible Writing Writer Support Group on Facebook, gave me well-deserved garbage, hard time, crap talking, because life is very hectic right now, and on top of life being hectic, my brain's just scattered. You know, the Achilles injury being what it is not making life fun. We've got some phase of life stuff going on. We've got big life decisions that we are having to make, right? So it draws attention. And to be honest, I'm waiting for the scales to come back from my editor. It should be in my hands, but long before you hear this episode. And it's May 1st today. But I'm kind of getting stressed about it because I wanted to have it out at the beginning of June. And my conversations with my editor are making it sound like if I can reach that milestone, I've got a lot of late nights ahead of me. So thank God I didn't set up a pre-order on that one yet, as I still learn my way through all of this. And to be honest, I don't need to learn my way through it. I know what I'm doing, and one of the reasons why I didn't set up the pre-order yet, because I was working with an editor who's new for a book, working on books, but I've worked with her on short stories before, and I know how thorough she is. So I kind of anticipated the possibilities, and I did not set up a pre-order because I didn't want that stress of having to get out a book by a certain time or be banned from Amazon for a year. So, good decision, but at the same time, I haven't published anything since November, and that was a nonfiction book and a horror anthology. I only have one novel out there, and sales are telling me, almost a year of sales is telling me now that novels sell and nonfiction is a lot harder if you don't dedicate a lot of time to it, which I don't. I don't do the whole speaking thing. I don't do the whole promote myself as the expert in this area. It just doesn't make me happy, so I don't do it. I put novel idea to podcasts out there to help people, not to position myself as the authority in podcasting, to novels to podcasting, or novels to audio drama, or fiction to audio drama, whatever it may be. Decision I made: to stay happy. Now, that also is a theme that rings true in critiquing. Critique groups are interesting. There's many forms and fashions, and personalities and dynamics and all that stuff. A lot of writers who have imposter syndrome, who don't think they're all that, who doubt themselves at every turn, it's hard to share that work. And if you don't have the right type of critique group, it could damage you, but it could turn people away from writing permanently. And that's a shame. On Facebook, on the Horrible Writing Writer Support Group, we do a little bit of that in the monthly Breviloquent Challenge. NJ Boyer is one of the authors there. She sets up this monthly challenge with 3 criteria for a flash fiction. And those stories, we write them, we submit them on that post. Some of them are selected for my new podcast, The Stories We Tell. So if you haven't listened to that, go subscribe. There's 2 episodes out already. The 3rd one will come out at the end of May. But in posting those stories, we also give each other feedback. That's one way, that's one form of a critique group. There's other online groups where that happens, whether it be in Facebook or other areas. Reddit's another example where you could have them. It could be a collective of people having closed groups where it's only a certain number of people who are allowed to be in. They'll do Facebook Lives, they'll do Hangouts, they'll meet online to have these, or they'll do the trade, right? I read yours, you read mine. Let's send each other notes. There's also the in-person stuff. So all of these things have their nuances, their benefits, and their detractors, if you will. Nothing is perfect. No group is perfect. For example, my local group that I physically go to as often as I can, personality-wise, is a great group. They've actually shifted and now have 2 groups, one at night and one during the day. I go to the day because I'm mentally fresher, and I have a schedule where I can get away with that. But as great as they are in respect to personality, the only thing I've brought to the group, outside of some flash fiction pieces here and there, is darker stuff. I never brought Chasing the Demon there. Or I did. I brought the first chapter there at my first group. But beyond that, it's all been short stories, flash fiction pieces for the stories we tell. 12 Deaths of Christmas, The Scales, you all haven't seen it yet, RIP. So it's all darker stuff. And this group isn't a diverse group at all. On almost, a lot of the, at least the surface criteria, the surface demographics, for the most part, same age range, same gender, same race type of stuff. And then on top of that, artistically, not very diverse. A lot of memoir, a lot of short story, some fantasy, one other person writes darker stuff, some poetry, but it's all pretty center lane type writing. Nothing wrong with that, a lot of good writing. But there's one person who is writing more of a fantastical fantasy. Her world is very unique their world is very unique and interesting. There's another person who's doing time traveling pirate stuff. So it's a little more toward a fringe than in that center. But for the most part, the group is right in the center. I tell you all of this because I don't know if a lot of folks give themselves this allowance when it comes to your critique groups. I recommend that you choose multiple critique groups and do so strategically. For example, I don't go to my local group with feedback from a horror perspective. And I don't go there for grammatical stuff or structure stuff anyways. Well, I mean grammatical, really. Story structure, I still look for feedback from them on. But when it comes to horror stuff, their comments come with a huge grain of salt. I really don't put a lot of weight into it because they're not horror writers and they're not horror fans. So the things that they're going to see, good, bad, and ugly, are things that come from that perspective of someone who doesn't read it. So why would I put a whole lot of credence on that aspect of the feedback? Now, characterization, pacing, inconsistencies, basic story elements that are not genre specific, yeah, I will listen all day long. And I do. And they've got great comments. But I also keep that in mind. Are you doing that with your critique group? Do you have a critique group? If you don't, get one. And if you do, are they your target readers? Do they read the things that you're writing? Find out. Because that's going to be an important thing when it comes to their genre-specific feedback to you. Again, you don't dismiss everything that they say, but you do keep it in the back of your mind. For example, those of you who have read all the stories in 12 Deaths of Christmas, one of the stories in there, I have a story about an assassin, and she's been hired. It's her destiny to kill this tyrant, this overlord of a king, this oppressive, horrible human being. And there's a twist at the end of it where she becomes, spoiler alert, she becomes impregnated by what she thinks is the spirit that has guided her, that has influenced her, and that was also influencing this king. And I go into some physical description of the copulation, if you will. Now, you only get 20 minutes to read, and I split that story up so I could get to the ending and focus on the feedback for it. And when I was done with that ending of that story, I had about 10 minutes of feedback time left. And I got at least half of that was used by the readers, by the critique group, trying to understand if this was metaphorical or literal, because it's a little too hard to believe. They just don't get it. They didn't get it. And, it's not the best use of my feedback time, but that's an isolated incident. But again, had I listened to them, if I didn't know their backgrounds, if I assumed that they were coming at it from a horror perspective, that could have influenced me away from that descriptive, the descriptives in that scene, or that scene entirely. So make sure you know where those folks are coming from. Then, so you've got that group, which is great, because they're going to focus on the story elements, and they're not going to be influenced by a specific genre that is yours. They're more coming at it from their genre, which is great for a mass appeal aspect, that you have all these people who prefer a type of fiction, and that type guides what they look for in stories, and then therefore it also influences their feedback. That's great stuff. You don't have to be aimed to write mass market. You don't have to worry or even be concerned or have it as an objective to reach all these readers. But at the same time, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want a broader swath of readers to give you some feedback? But you also need to do the due diligence for yourself as a writer and make sure that you do have a group who is your genre and can give you what you need. All genres have different pacing. All of them have their specific tropes. Readers of that stuff are going to look for that, and that's the genre you're writing to, so that's the stuff you need to be true to. So you're going to want folks who are going to be able to help you with that. Usually you'll find that online. So that's the neat thing, is I go to my local group face to face and get that feedback. And fortunately, we're a more mature group, so nobody has a problem giving each other pretty candid feedback. Online, while the group is forming, norming, storming, and performing, you go through those phases. Some people will never get out of the forming phase, and they'll always be nice and tell you how wonderful your story is, which is not helpful feedback at all. But a lot of groups mature over time, or you may be fortunate enough to walk into an established group, and they're established, and you'll walk into a situation where you will get that feedback. I try to create that in our horrible writing. When people do put those short stories up, when people do put a blurb up and they want help with it, that's something that we try to do, many of us, and definitely myself. I don't want to mislead you. I don't want to tell you how wonderful everything is, because Nothing's perfect, and there's always something you could think about. And that's what I want as an artist. I don't want people telling me how wonderful everything is. I want to know those things that you found might have been needing a little more TLC, and that's okay. These are things that you've got to look for. So, and you've got to do it with other people. It can't be blood. It can't be family. It can't be loved ones. I mean, my wife is the alpha reader of alpha readers. She reads everything when it's still raw and needs a lot of work. And she's good at it, and she's getting better the more stuff I give to her, where she's starting to not care about what she says, which is what I want. It wasn't always like that. With the scales, the one that's at the editor now, she read the early version of it and didn't really pick out any major problems. And when I let that thing sit to go write the other books and came back to the scales, I saw just how many problems there were. I gave it to some beta readers. They gave me a couple issues I needed to address, like, hey, these two characters, they kind of show up. We think something's going to happen with them, and then they disappear for the rest of the book until the end. What's the deal? I had to go fix that. And now my editor's letting me know that there's some things that could require a lot of work. I'm interested to see what her feedback is. We'll see. We'll see if I agree too. But yeah, so make sure that it's not those loved ones. Those loved ones are only going to tell you things that they want to tell you. It's influenced by your relationship. That's no place for a performance-based metric. You know, this is, you can't go work for your mom for the rest of your life because your mom's going to always tell you how wonderful you were. You need those people who don't have that emotional attachment to you and your dreams. And that requires a little bit of courage. So here's your homework assignment. Get an in-person critique group. Find one in your reasonable commuting area. Form one if there isn't one. Go talk to your library and see what they've got if you can't find anything. Check Meetup and see if there's a group on there. Stop coming up with excuses why you can't get to it. Get to that group and do it. But also, two-parter, you need to find an online critique group as well. There's some beta reading groups on Facebook. Reddit has them. You can even form your own by throwing things out on your social media feeds and recruiting that way. But one way or another, you need to find other people who are going to give you genre-specific stuff online, general stuff. I just went French. General stuff in person. Get those two groups. You've got a month to do it. And then report back into me. Your writing deserves this. It's scary. It's unnerving. It's raw. You've got to open yourself up. But this is what you have to do if you're serious about this. So get on that. And while you're waiting to give me feedback on the groups that you did find, go ahead and leave a rating and review for this show, please. I always need more and more of those because I just don't get enough of them for the show, even though the ones I get are absolutely amazing. Thank you very much. If you like the show, how about keep helping me keep it on the air, becoming a patron over at patreon.com/Paul Sading. Gets this show, any fiction that I do, early exclusive access to audiobooks as I start working on the next one. You get The Crown of Thieves, which is my medieval high fantasy audio podcast. That's already got a teaser out. Episode 1 is being produced now. You get all of these things starting at $1 a month. You can get more if you want to support more. But those are the two great ways that you can help this show and help it keep going. Make sure you sign up for my newsletter over at paulsading.com. If you want any of the special news about the upcoming books and special pricing on those books, that'll be available only to newsletter subscribers. Go get that homework done. Until I see you again in the next episode, keep being epic.
This has been Horrible Writing, and hopefully after this episode, you suck less than you did at the beginning. I am Paul Sading, your host extraordinaire. You can find me over on the Twitterverse at Writing Horrible and over at paulsading.com/horrible-writing. Until next time, suck less.